Today, we're going to talk about where your tax dollars are going. Many people have this idea that the federal government spends most of its money on welfare. The idea is that the government takes money from people who are working and gives it to people who aren't. As it turns out, they're wrong about the first part, but right about the second. That's because for every dollar the government spends on welfare for poor people, it spends $3 on Social Security and Medicare for retired people. Together, Social Security and Medicare make up close to 40% of the government's budget. Defense and veterans benefits take up another 25% of the budget, and interest on the debt and programs like transportation, education, and scientific research take up another 20%. Only about 12% of the federal budget goes to welfare programs, like income support or food stamps or housing, and another 8% goes to Medicaid. So the government does not spend most of its money on welfare for the poor, but it does spend almost 40% of its budget on people who don't work, because they're retired. Now here's the thing you may not have heard. Spending on most of those categories is actually shrinking, and our deficits are actually falling very quickly. The programs whose cost has been growing and will continue to grow for the next several decades are the healthcare programs. As much as I would love to blame that problem on the baby boom generation, the problem with the healthcare programs is not the number of people being covered, it's the rising cost of spending per person. In fact, if health expenditures keep growing at the same rate, within a couple of decades, they'll crowd out all the other functions of the federal government. In fact, the federal government will basically turn into one giant health insurance company with its own aircraft carriers. And the deficits that the government will run in those future decades will actually dwarf those that we've run over the past couple of years. That's why economists don't worry very much about our most recent deficits, but they do spend a lot of time worrying about these future trends, while politicians seem to be doing exactly the opposite. But there's good news. Over the past several years, spending on Medicare has slowed substantially. And if that slowdown continues, the federal budget will be roughly balanced over the next several decades. That's how big of a player healthcare spending is. So the next time you hear somebody say that the government gives most of its money to people who aren't working, tell them that they're right. But it's not going to the poor, it's going to grandma.
Who is that EconGuy?
I'm Patrick Walsh. I'm an associate professor of economics at St. Michael's College near Burlington, Vermont.